Sir, I am the registered owner of this vehicle. My name's on the title, on the insurance.
Okay, step out of the vehicle.
Database.
I'm not asking
Verify
again.
that right now.
Step out of the vehicle. I'm not asking
Officer
again.
Walsh, badge number 4471. I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing right now.
Okay.
I am a retired United States Army
I said
officer.
step out.
I will not be stepping out.
There are moments in life that arrive without warning and demand everything you have. Not your strength, not your anger, not your fear. Everything you know. For Raymond Jerome Ellis, that moment arrived at exactly 9:47 on a Tuesday night on a quiet stretch of highway just outside of Scottsdale, Arizona, when blue and red lights filled his rearview mirror and a 20-year career's worth of constitutional law knowledge became the most important thing he had ever packed for a drive home. He was not speeding. He was not swerving. He had not run a single light. He was simply a 41-year-old black man driving his own car home from a dinner meeting in a charcoal gray suit with his tie loosened just slightly, with smooth music playing low on the radio and 4 minutes standing between him and his driveway. And in the 43 minutes that followed, everything that Officer Craig Walsh thought he understood about a routine traffic stop was going to be quietly, methodically, and permanently dismantled by the man sitting behind that steering wheel. What happened on that Scottsdale highway would be seen by nearly 50 million people around the world. The body camera footage would be picked up by every major news network, dissected frame by legal analysts, shared across every social media platform imaginable, and eventually incorporated into law enforcement training programs across the country as a documented example of exactly what officers must never do. But this was not a story about anger. It was not a story about fear. It was a story about what happens when a man who has spent 20 years studying the law meets a situation that is designed to make him forget it and refuses. To understand what Raymond did on that highway, you first have to understand what it took to make him the man who was sitting in that car. Raymond grew up in South Phoenix, the son of a public school teacher and a postal worker. He was the first person in his family to attend a 4-year university, graduating with honors from Howard University with a degree in political science. From there, he went directly to law school at Arizona State University's Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, where he graduated in the top 5% of his class and served as editor of a law review. After passing the bar, Raymond did not walk into a private firm and start billing hours. He enlisted in the United States Army as a commissioned officer and spent the next 11 years serving as a Judge Advocate General Corps officer, which means he was a military attorney. He advised generals. He prosecuted and defended court-martial cases. He trained soldiers on a uniform code of military justice and the constitutional protections that applied to every one of them regardless of rank. He knew constitutional law not as something he had read in a textbook, but as something he had practiced, argued, and applied in real-world, high-pressure situations for over a decade. When he retired from the Army at the rank of major, Raymond returned to Scottsdale and opened a small civil rights law firm. By the time of this incident, he had successfully litigated 7 civil rights cases, 4 of which involved unlawful stops and searches conducted by law enforcement. He had 3 cases pending at the time of the traffic stop. He was not paranoid. He was not looking for trouble, but he was absolutely prepared if it found him. And on this particular Tuesday night, it did. Raymond had spent the earlier part of that evening at a dinner meeting in downtown Scottsdale with 2 potential clients considering hiring his firm for a workplace discrimination case. The meeting had gone well. He was in a good mood, the kind that comes from a long but genuinely productive day. He got into his 2023 Mercedes-Benz GLE 450, programmed his home address into the GPS, and merged onto the highway heading back toward the Arcadia neighborhood where he had lived for the past 3 years in a 4-bedroom home he owned outright. The night was clear and warm the way Scottsdale nights are in October, the sky wide and full of stars, and the highway almost entirely empty. He had the radio turned down low, something smooth and unhurried, the kind of music that makes a night drive feel like a reward. He checked his speed out of habit. The limit on that stretch was 65. He was doing 63. Then the lights came on behind him. Raymond felt something he would later describe in his written complaint not as fear, but as recognition. He had seen this before. He had heard about it his entire life. He had studied the legal architecture around it for 2 decades. He pulled over calmly to the right shoulder, put the car in park, turned on his interior light so that both his hands would be clearly visible, and placed him flat at the top of the steering wheel. He did everything right, everything by the book, and then he waited. The officer who approached that vehicle was Craig Walsh, a 10-year veteran of the Scottsdale Police Department. Walsh was 38 years old. He had received 2 commendations during his career and was regarded by his supervisors as experienced and capable. He had conducted hundreds of traffic stops. This was routine to him, or at least that is what he believed when he stepped out of his cruiser and walked toward the Mercedes with his hand resting near his holster. His body camera, required by department policy to be activated at the start of any stop, was already recording. Walsh tapped on the window. Raymond lowered it. Walsh looked at Raymond, then at the interior of the car, and said in a tone that carried something beyond routine professionalism from the very first word. "Whose car is this?" Not license and registration. Not the reason for the stop. Not even a greeting. The first words out of Officer Walsh's mouth were, "Whose car is this?" And Raymond, completely calm, said, "This is my car, officer. Can I ask why you pulled me over?" Walsh did not answer. He said, "I need you to step out of the vehicle." Raymond did not comply with that request, not because he was being hostile or difficult, but because he knew, as a trained legal professional, that an officer cannot lawfully order someone out of a vehicle without reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed or is being committed. A car traveling under the speed limit on a public highway with no traffic violations is not reasonable articulable suspicion. A black man driving a luxury vehicle through an affluent neighborhood at night is not reasonable articulable suspicion, regardless of whatever instinct Walsh may have been following. Raymond said, "Officer, I am happy to provide you with my license and registration. I would simply like to know the lawful reason for this stop first." "That is my right." Walsh's jaw tightened. The body camera caught it clearly. He said, "I have reason to believe this vehicle may be stolen." And this is where everything began to unravel for Officer Craig Walsh. Raymond did not panic. He did not raise his voice. He did not become emotional or combative. He simply said, "I understand. I can clear that up very quickly." He reached slowly and deliberately into his glove compartment, keeping every movement visible and unhurried. And he produced 3 documents. His driver's license, his vehicle registration, listing his full name, his home address in the Arcadia neighborhood, and the vehicle identification number of the exact car he was sitting in, and a printed copy of the title, bearing his name, signed and notarized at the time of purchase 6 months earlier. He passed all 3 through the window and said quietly, "My name is Raymond Jerome Ellis. I purchased this vehicle on April 9th of this year from Desert European Motor Cars in Scottsdale. Every document you are holding confirms I am the registered owner. If your system shows this vehicle as stolen, there has been a data entry error, and you can verify ownership right now by running the VIN. That takes 90 seconds. Walsh took the documents, walked back to his patrol car, and Raymond sat still. Interior light on, hands on the steering wheel, waiting. Running a vehicle identification number through the state database takes 90 seconds. Had Walsh run it immediately, he would have seen at once that the car was not stolen, that it was registered to Raymond Ellis, and that the address on the registration matched a home right there in Scottsdale. The stop should have ended in under 2 minutes. Instead, Walsh returned to the window after nearly 4 minutes, handed back the registration and the title, and held onto the license. He said, "I still need you to step out of the vehicle, sir." Raymond asked, calmly and clearly, "Have you run the VIN?" Walsh said, "I am asking you to step out of the vehicle." Raymond said, "Officer, you have my registration and my title. Both documents confirm I am the registered owner of this car. Can you tell me what specific crime you believe is being committed right now that justifies asking me to exit my vehicle?" There was a pause. Then Walsh said, "Your behavior is making me suspicious." Raymond, without raising his voice even slightly, said, "My behavior has been completely cooperative since the moment you approached. I have provided every document you requested. I have kept my hands visible at all times. I have spoken to you respectfully and without interruption. If my behavior appears suspicious to you, officer, I would ask you to consider carefully whether your interpretation of that behavior has anything to do with the color of my skin and the type of car I am driving." The body camera caught Walsh's reaction in full. His eyes narrowed. His posture stiffened. He was not accustomed to being spoken to this way at the side of a road. He was not accustomed to someone in this position knowing the law well enough to articulate it out loud, in real time, without flinching. He tried again. "Sir, this is your last warning. Step out of the vehicle." Raymond said, "Officer, I am not going to exit this vehicle. I am legally parked on the shoulder of a public road. I am in possession of every document proving I own this vehicle. You have not informed me of any lawful reason for this stop, and you have not cited any specific articulable suspicion that a crime is taking place. Ordering me out of my car under these circumstances constitutes an unlawful detention under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. I intend to document this interaction fully." Walsh stepped back from the window and called for backup. 2 additional patrol units arrived within 4 minutes. Now there were 3 officers standing on the shoulder of Scottsdale Highway, blue lights flashing against the dark desert sky, all focused on one man, sitting quietly in his own car with his hands resting on his steering wheel. Walsh approached the window again, this time with a second officer named Brian Soto standing just behind him. Walsh said, "Mr. Ellis, we have reason to believe this vehicle was involved in a report earlier this evening. We are asking you to cooperate." Raymond said, "Officer, a vehicle being involved in a report does not mean the vehicle is stolen. I am the registered owner, and I have provided proof of that. I am asking you directly. Has the VIN on this vehicle returned as stolen in your system?" There was a pause. Officer Soto, who had apparently just run the check himself from his unit, cleared his throat. He leaned toward Walsh and said something low. The body camera's microphone picked it up. What Soto said was, "It is coming back clean. Registered to a Raymond Ellis, address on Camelback Road." Camelback Road was Raymond's home address, right there in Scottsdale. That was the moment everything changed. The car was not stolen. The system confirmed it. The VIN was clean. The registration matched. The title matched. The driver matched. There was no stolen vehicle. There was no crime. There was no reasonable, articulable suspicion of any kind. There was nothing but a 41-year-old black man who had been pulled over, surrounded by 3 police cruisers, and held on the side of a public road for over 25 minutes while driving his own car home from work. Walsh stood at the window. He did not immediately apologize. He did not wave Raymond through. He stood there for a moment that the body camera captured in complete stillness. And in that moment, you could see it move across his face. The realization, the recognition, the dawning understanding that he had made a catastrophic mistake, not just procedurally, but in front of a man who understood exactly what that mistake meant and exactly what to do with it. Raymond said, "I want your full name, your badge number, your supervisor's name, and the incident report number for this stop. I want those right now, please." Walsh provided them. His voice had changed completely. The authority and edge that had been present from the first tap on the window were entirely gone. He was speaking carefully now, measuring every word. He said the stop had resulted from a dispatch call about a vehicle matching this description. Raymond asked him to clarify. Walsh said they had received a call about a dark-colored luxury SUV matching this description in the area. Raymond was quiet for just a moment. Then he said, "So you pulled me over because someone called in a dark-colored luxury SUV. Can you tell me what the reported crime was? Was the vehicle reported stolen, or was there something else?" Walsh hesitated. He said the call had been about a suspicious vehicle in the area. Raymond said, "So there was no stolen vehicle report. There was a call about a suspicious vehicle, and the vehicle was deemed suspicious because it was a luxury car in this neighborhood at this hour. Is that correct?" Walsh did not answer. Raymond said, "I'm going to drive home now. I live 6 minutes from here on Camelback Road. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to file a formal complaint with the Scottsdale Police Department, the Arizona Attorney General's office, and I'm going to be in contact with my colleagues at the ACLU of Arizona. I'm also going to formally request the complete body camera footage from all 3 units present tonight under Arizona's public records law. I hope you have a good evening, officer." He raised his window. He drove home. The entire encounter had lasted 43 minutes. That night, Raymond sat at his kitchen table and wrote down everything he could remember, every exchange, every timestamp, every name, every word. He did not do it out of anger. He did it because he understood that memory fades and documentation does not. The next morning at 6 o'clock, Raymond sat down at his desk and began writing in earnest. What he produced over the next 4 hours was not a standard complaint form. It was a 22-page legal brief, precisely structured, meticulously cited, and absolutely devastating. It referenced case law by name. It cited department policy violations by section number. It identified every specific moment in the 43-minute interaction where Walsh had violated Raymond's constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment. It attached a time-stamped transcript that Raymond had reconstructed from memory, later confirmed to be nearly word-for-word accurate when compared to the body camera footage. It included formal requests for the body camera footage from all 3 units, the dispatch recording, and every written report filed by the 3 officers that night. It was not the kind of complaint that gets filed and forgotten in a drawer. It was the kind of complaint that makes an internal affairs investigator sit up straight and reach for the phone. The Scottsdale Police Department received Raymond's complaint on Wednesday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Officer Craig Walsh had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. That turnaround time was almost unheard of. Complaints of this nature typically sit in a queue for weeks before any action is taken. But Raymond's brief was so thorough and so precisely supported by evidence that the department's legal counsel flagged it as a priority case within hours of receiving it. The internal affairs investigation was assigned to Lieutenant Angela Mercer, a 16-year veteran with an unblemished record and a reputation for thorough, impartial reviews. She pulled the body camera footage from all 3 units the same afternoon she received the assignment. She watched Walsh's footage once. Then she watched it again. Then she called in the department's use of force coordinator to watch it with her. What the footage confirmed was everything Raymond had written in his complaint and more. Walsh had failed to state a lawful reason for the stop. Walsh had demanded Raymond exit the vehicle without legal justification. Walsh had disregarded documentary evidence of ownership provided within the first 90 seconds of the encounter. Walsh had called for backup before running the VIN, which the department's own policy required as the first step in any suspected stolen vehicle situation. And Walsh had failed to run the VIN at all during the 4 minutes he spent in his patrol car. But there was something else in the footage that made the case considerably more serious. When Walsh returned to the car after Soto informed him the VIN was clean, Walsh's body camera caught him glancing at his phone. Investigators later determined he had received a text message at that moment. That message, subpoenaed as part of the investigation, had been sent by Officer Soto from his personal phone while standing at the scene. It read, "Simply just let him go. It is not worth it," which meant that at least one of the other officers present that night was aware in real time that the stop had no legal basis, and rather than formally correcting the situation on camera, had attempted to resolve it quietly through a private message. That discovery expanded the investigation significantly. Then investigators pulled the original dispatch recording. What it revealed made the entire stop collapse completely. The call had been placed by a neighbor 2 blocks away, reporting an unfamiliar luxury SUV parked briefly in a cul-de-sac. There had been no theft report. There had been no crime. There had been a neighbor who did not recognize a car in their neighborhood, picked up the phone, and Officer Walsh had done the rest. The investigation concluded in 6 weeks, extraordinarily fast for a case of this complexity, but the evidence was overwhelming and Raymond's complaint had already identified every piece of it with surgical precision. The department's final findings were unambiguous. The stop lacked any lawful basis. Walsh's request for Raymond to exit the vehicle was without legal justification. Walsh had violated department policy on lawful stops, evidence verification procedures, use of force escalation, and professional conduct standards. And a review of Walsh's prior stop records revealed that over the previous 18 months, he had conducted stops in Scottsdale in which the driver was black at a rate 5 times higher than demographic statistics for the area would suggest. 3 of those prior stops had generated complaints that were never formally investigated. All 3 complainants were black men driving late-model vehicles. The department recommended termination. Craig Walsh resigned before the formal termination could take effect. His 10-year career ended because of a 43-minute traffic stop on a Tuesday night in October. Officer Soto received a formal reprimand and mandatory ethics retraining. The department settled with Raymond Ellis out of court. The terms were not disclosed, but those familiar with the matter described the settlement as substantial. When the body camera footage was released publicly under Arizona's public records law, the response was immediate and massive. News outlets picked it up within hours. Legal analysts posted breakdowns that received millions of views. Civil rights organizations used the footage in public awareness campaigns. Several law schools incorporated it into their constitutional law curriculum as a real-world illustration of Fourth Amendment violations during traffic stops. The footage did not go viral because it was dramatic. It went viral because it was quiet, because it showed a man who never once raised his voice, never once lost his composure, and was right about every single thing he said from the first word to the last. After the footage circulated, 6 other people came forward with similar accounts involving Walsh. 4 black men who had been stopped in Scottsdale in the previous 2 years. 2 of them described nearly identical scenarios, being asked whose car it was before being asked for a license, being pressured to exit their vehicles without a stated legal reason, being made to feel like they did not belong in the neighborhood they lived in. None of their prior complaints had been formally investigated. The question that the community of Scottsdale could not easily set aside was the one that always follows stories like this. How many people had experienced exactly what Raymond experienced, but without the legal training, the composure, or the knowledge to document it and fight back? How many complaints have been filed in forms too vague to force a response? How many people had simply driven home shaken, told themselves nothing would come of it, and let it go? In the months that followed, the Scottsdale Police Department implemented a series of mandatory reforms. All officers were required to complete additional constitutional law training focused specifically on the legal requirements for traffic stops. Body camera activation protocols were tightened with automatic disciplinary consequences for failure to comply. A civilian oversight board was established to review complaints within 30 days of filing, and the department partnered with a local civil rights organization to conduct annual audits of stop and search data, specifically examining racial disparity patterns. They made their officers take, in essence, the training course that Raymond Ellis could have taught on day one. Raymond returned to his law firm and took on 3 additional cases directly related to unlawful traffic stops in the months following his own incident. He began speaking at law schools, community events, and police reform conferences across Arizona. He co-authored a legal guide called Know Your Rights during a traffic stop that was downloaded over 300,000 times for free from his firm's website. He said publicly that the settlement amount was never the point. The point was the documentation, the accountability, the change that followed. Here's what this story is really about beneath the specific names and the specific highway and the specific October night. Under the Fourth Amendment, a police officer must have reasonable suspicion based on specific, articulable facts to conduct a traffic stop. Not a feeling, not a vague dispatch call about an unfamiliar car, not the make of a vehicle or the skin of the person driving it. Specific, articulable facts. In this case, none existed. And every moment after that initial unlawful stop, every demand to exit the vehicle, every minute of detention, every call for backup, added to a legal liability that was always going to arrive. Raymond Ellis simply made sure it arrived on schedule. There are lessons in this story for everyone watching. If you're ever pulled over, turn on your interior light, place your hands visibly on the steering wheel, and stay calm. You're legally permitted to ask why you're being stopped. You're legally permitted to ask for a badge number and a supervisor. You're not legally required to exit your vehicle unless the officer provides a lawful reason grounded in specific suspicion of a crime. Do not physically resist under any circumstances because physical resistance, however justified it may feel, can be redefined in ways that damage your case. Document everything the moment you are safe. Names, badge numbers, timestamps, the faces of any witnesses. Write it down before you sleep because memory fades and documentation does not. If you witness a stop, record it where it is legal to do so. State the time and location out loud on your recording. Your presence and your camera create accountability when official accounts fail. And for officers watching this, the message is direct. Authority is not instinct. A luxury car in an affluent neighborhood driven by a black man is not a reasonable basis for a stop. Calm and cooperation are not indicators of guilt. De-escalation is not surrender. It is the standard. The moment an officer substitutes assumption for articulable fact, they have not just made a procedural error. They have exposed every person in that department to the consequences that Raymond Ellis was entirely prepared to deliver. Raymond Jerome Ellis drove home from that Scottsdale highway on a Tuesday night and sat down at his kitchen table and started writing. He did not shout. He did not post. He did not call anyone in anger. He simply wrote down what happened, organized it, cited it, and submitted it to the people who were required to act on it. And they did. The most important question this story leaves behind is not about Raymond. He had the training, the network, the knowledge, and the platform. The question is about the person who does not. The person who experiences the same 43 minutes on the same shoulder of the same road, knows that something wrong has happened, feels it completely, but does not have the case law memorized or the legal brief ready or the contacts on speed dial. That gap between the rights people technically have and the rights they are actually able to exercise in the moment they need them most is the gap that this story is really asking us to close. Not just through policy, not just through reform, through knowledge shared widely and freely, so that the next person on that shoulder of the road is just as prepared as Raymond Ellis was, regardless of whether they went to law school or served in the Army or spent 20 years inside the machinery of constitutional law. Because the rights belong to everyone. The knowledge of how to use them should too.